Welcome to the AEC Groundbreaking Growth Podcast.
Hosted by Stanball Ness.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast today. I am Emily Lawrence, your host, and I'm here with Jennifer Knox, my lovely co-host.
Hey, everyone. We're also joined today by another awesome colleague, Scott Butcher. He is a director in our Strategic Growth Advisory Group here at Stanball Ness, and is really going to dig into reskilling with us today. So, Scott, when we talk about reskilling, can you at least give us a definition? What do we actually mean by that?
Hey, Jen. Hey, Emily. Well, I guess it depends who you ask. Because the one thing you'll find out if you do some research, different places have different definitions. But I think there's somewhat of agreement on a definition, at least among a lot of legitimate sources. And so, if we look at upskilling and reskilling, upskilling is learning a new skill that's going to help you do your job better. So I do a lot of strategic planning. And if I learned a new skill that would help our clients with strategic planning, I would be upskilling. Conversely, reskilling is sort of changing lanes. It's learning a new skill for a new job. You might switch positions within a firm, for instance, or take on some new responsibilities that was not part of your job in the past. And you need to reskill and learn the new skill to do the new thing. So upskilling, do what you're doing better. Reskilling, learn something new. And I think if we look at it that way, it's a pretty standard definition. And like putting into the context of, let's say you're a land surveyor and you learn total station, very common tool for surveyors for multiple decades now. And you might have gotten some upskilling to learn as there's upgrades to the total station and the software that you're using to interpret it. But now there's survey drones.
Yeah.
And learning to be a drone pilot is reskilling. That's not upskilling. You're learning something totally new and different, and that's reskilling.
So oftentimes it seems like it may be kind of a horizontal step, maybe bringing a new technology into like your current role and leveraging it a little bit differently. Does that align with reskilling?
Yes. So yeah, upskilling, think maybe there's an upgrade to the software you're using.
Yeah.
Reskilling, it's a brand new software to learn. Yeah. I feel like right now I am reskilling because I am learning ChatGPT. It is not part of my job description. It's never been. I didn't know it existed a year ago. And now it's a great tool that we can leverage in so many different ways, but I'm reskilling to learn how to use it and to become a good, prompt writer, which is the skill I need.
So Scott, I know you've done some research and just, as consultants, I think we see a lot of gaps, and I know we've talked about that and you do the trends workshops, but what are you saying? What kind of data have you gathered around this topic of reskilling and of automation and how that's impacting it?
Well, we all need to reskill. We all should be reskilling. And look, I'm a biased opinion. For people who know Stanball Ness, we love our Gallup strengths, our Clifton strengths, and there are 34 strength, and my number 3 strength is learning. So I'm always learning something new. So yeah, I have a biased opinion. So what does the data out there tell us? Well, there was recently a study that found that it's funny, 44% comes up in a couple different studies with slightly different meanings. In one study, I believe it was McKinsey, found that 44% of employees will need to reskill within the next 4 years. And then there's like 43% of employees that have skills gaps that were identified by firm leadership. There was another study by another entity that found that 44% of people will need to reskill in the next 5 years, specifically because of automation and artificial intelligence. So that first 44% from McKinsey was just because the world. And the second one was very specific to automation and AI. And I think we're actually going to see that accelerate, right? I just gave the example of learning ChatGPT. we're all learning it, right? But we're reskilling. We're doing so voluntarily because we believe it can help us do our jobs better. But there will be positions out there in the very near future that you will be forced to reskill to maintain that job because it becomes an expectation.
So, Scott, when you talk about that 44% and these percentages, you're talking about the workforce as a whole. Is that correct?
Correct.
In AEC specifically, what are we seeing? Just kind of narrow it.
It's much harder to find specific architecture, engineering, construction data that goes down to that level. There are certain data points out there that we do see that might be AEC specific. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and one of them that's been out there, just a couple of months. Goldman Sachs did some research on the industries that were going to be the most disrupted because of artificial intelligence and automation, and certainly architecture and engineering scored very highly in that. Construction, on the other hand, not heavily disrupted because it doesn't rely a lot on tools that could benefit from artificial intelligence. Yeah, there's automation, there's self-driving construction equipment, there's robotic bricklayers. Certainly, those are going to be components that are increasingly disrupted moving forward. But you think of accountants, crunching numbers, very hugely disrupted because so much of it is software, computer technology based that artificial intelligence can step in and do it. Where we see a lot of the disruption on the architecture engineering side, and it's been happening for several years now, is the tools like generative design. So we see generative design in Revit. It's existed, I think, since release 2020, but there were other plugins even prior to that. And so it's changing the way that a architect is actually designing a building. So it's in its infancy. I mean, it's barely scratched the surface of what it could do, which is why the disruption is minimal today. Moving forward, I mean, what if one architect could do the work of four architects today? That's not a prediction, but it's a possibility. More likely, it's going to be one architect can do the work of equivalent of 1.5 to 2 architects, right? It's not going to be that significant, but that's still, we're talking about a disruption of a quarter or a third of the workforce because of artificial intelligence. That's a little terrifying for the industry, and I think a lot of industries are looking at this right now outside of AEC, and they're reevaluating everything and trying to figure out, okay, what reskilling do we need internally to start to utilize some of these tools, and what does it mean for us long term? And what I think, Emily, some of the statistics we do know is that this was our own Stanball research. 85% of firms, this was conducted 5.5 to 6 months ago. 85% of firms view the talent shortage as one of the most significant issues they're dealing with right now. It depends where you are geographically. It depends upon the services you offer. It depends upon the market sectors. But by and large, if 85% of our clients are saying we can't find the people, that's a pretty significant trend. And the reality is that artificial intelligence and automation could actually help offset that to an extent.
Yeah, and that's again, to your point, Scott, is we need to think maybe a bit more holistically as an industry and say, okay, how do I develop a strategy around technology, maybe to leverage that technology into an opportunity to solve another problem around workforce shortages. But then you need kind of a reskilling portion of that strategy to say, okay, how do we integrate this technology? What are the new skills our people need to have to leverage it to really grow the company?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Jen. And, I think and I have the benefit of working with both of you. And so I can refer to some joint experiences that we had, but we sat there in Golden, Colorado last fall, and we said, boy, looking at the client requests for services that have been coming towards us over the past couple of years, maybe we need to bring on more of a, maybe not full-time, but a more heavily focused writer to add to the team to respond to the client requests. And then A couple months later, we're using ChatGPT, and we're seeing the evolution with new models, new versions of ChatGPT, and we're like, yeah, we don't need to hire a writer full time now. We can focus elsewhere. So I mean, are we being reactive to what's happening in technology, or are we being anticipatory, believing that we don't actually need to fill that role because we get that big technology assist? It's not the be all end all, but it is a technology assist, and we need to reskill to understand that, so we can utilize that as a tool for what we're doing, and maybe even move us into other service areas, or certainly take on more work than we were originally thinking, because now we have this technology assist. And that's terrifying to a lot of people. It's absolutely fascinating to me.
Yeah,
You're just an optimist, I think.
It's coming, right? Whether or not we're scared or resistant, these technologies will become more and more utilized. So we can kind of get on board and learn about them, or sort of have a steeper learning curve there.
Right. And you think about the context of, our discussion here, which is reskilling. What positions do you know at Stanball Ness, at our clients, that couldn't utilize some element of upskilling and reskilling? And Stanball Ness, we are big into interpersonal communication skills training, soft skills, power skills, call them what you want. To me, for a lot of positions, that's an upskill. So you're needing to do your job better. You're a project manager, but you're not a good communicator with your clients. We're not reskilling you. We're improving upon the skills you have in communication, in emotional intelligence. And communication is written and verbal, and it's active listening, and there's all these different components. And that's, in the marketplace right now, that is what is in demand. Certainly we see that with our clients. It's huge, but broader AEC, broader other industries, there is a most definite lack of interpersonal communication skills. It's generational driven, partially. It's technology driven across all generations. And we've heard from clients, man, these people were great at interacting with other human beings 10 years ago, and they've lost those skills. We need to bring it back to them. Our clients are telling us that. So that is an upskilling. Reskilling is integrating all these new technologies. And, every day, I swear, every day, and some of it is thanks to the two of you sharing information, but every day I'm learning of another artificial intelligence tool and what it can do or what it will do. And I'm thinking, is there any way I could possibly keep up with this? And the answer is no. Technology has already passed humans' capability of keeping up with it. But at least if we're intentional, we can make some level of effort to try to keep up with that. As I'm doing here, like you're seeing this imaginary technology curve and the rate of change, but here's technology change. It's almost vertical. Here's humans' ability to keep up. We're not there, but there's a midpoint. And if we're thinking about these technologies and then trying to adjust our skill set to keep up with them, I think that, for us, for our clients, for any firm, that can put you in a point of differentiation and help you gain a competitive advantage. And possibly down the road, there's a learning curve, but possibly improve your efficiencies and your productivity. So what's the back end result of that? You can take on more work. You can be more profitable. There's a lot of positive outcomes to embracing the reskilling and not fighting it. And look, we know change is hard. People love to do things the way they've always done it in the past. We've always done it that way. Literally the most dangerous phrase in business. And it doesn't fit with where we are headed today and the need for reskilling.
I think as kind of the younger generation comes into the workforce, they're probably more adapt to that change, right? They grew up with changing technology. So maybe they can kind of help the integration of some of this new tech and get that kind of in the organization's hands and be part of that strategy, right? Having that holistic view on how tech fits into your organization. I think they can be a huge part of that.
Absolutely, Jen. And I think, we're seeing, that's somewhat a reverse mentoring.
Yeah.
Right. So the senior leadership is mentoring the younger staff maybe on some of the hard skills to to manage a construction project, to be a mason, to be a civil engineer, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And then the younger staff members are saying, hey, I want to be a mason, but there's robots that do this now too.
Mhm.
Let me teach you the newer technologies that are coming into the marketplace that maybe you're not paying attention to.
Mhm.
And that's look, of the three of us on this call, I'm the old one, and having the two of you around is keeping me on my toes with technology because I have to keep up with you. So, and that's good. Again, I love that stuff, but it does force me to be on my toes.
Well, and it's nice to have an open-minded leader on your team that encourages that. But I also think of, one of our clients, small architectural firm, and they are fairly young. The leadership is young, but one of their main values is technology, and really making sure that they're at the forefront of having technology and good technology, relevant technology available to their employees. And so they invested in like iPads for every employee. Again, this is a small architectural firm. This is not like a large firm with tons of resources. They're a relatively new firm, but they want to attract younger talent and stay relevant with the larger and competitive with the larger firms. So they invested in a 3D laser scanner as well, which they look at as a really nice tool for their employees and for their clients. It eliminates a lot of the errors, human error of measuring, and it improves efficiency and makes it a lot quicker. So I think that's something that we'll start seeing more of, even with
And
the
right,
smaller firms.
Emily, right there is a classic example of reskilling. So you have an
Yeah.
architectural firm. What do? They design buildings, right? That's what
Yeah.
architects do. When architects want laser scans, they subcontract that to a firm that specializes in it, right? That's the
Mhm.
model. But now here's a smaller architectural firm that says, no, we're going to do this ourselves. We're going to control it all. And
Mhm.
that's innovative thinking on their part, but now is requiring architects, architectural designers to reskill to learn how to operate accurately the laser scanner.
Right. Right. And I even think of, what I think we were talking about this earlier just as a group, but you talked about those trade skills. I worked for a general contractor and they brought in BIM in-house. They bought a BIM company that was small, and they brought them in-house so that they could have that uh, technology at their disposal anytime they needed it. We even used it in proposals and pursuits, as something that could set us apart competitively to other local contractors. But I know you were talking about even masonry and some of that. What are
Sure.
some other examples? I
Well,
mean,
so, I
that's
mean,
just incredible.
I love the masonry example. Um,
Yeah.
so there's a product out there called SAM, the semi-automated mason. So SAM is a robotic bricklayer. SAM's been around for several years.
Mhm.
Sam is great. Sam is really good at doing plain walls with standard bonds. Sam can't set the joints. Sam can't do the corners. Sam can't do the fancy. But what masons retire often in their early 50s because their bodies are shot. I mean, it's a skill. It's a skilled trade, um, but it's not pleasant on the body. And so it's kind of funny. I had an opportunity in 2019 to give a keynote at a regional conference, and I was doing my trends thing, right? And I talked about Sam, and afterwards one person in the audience came up to me and said, oh, we just bought Sam, we're using Sam now on the job site. And so I had an opportunity then last year to give a keynote to the same audience, but all new trends. But I did bring up Sam and I said, okay, show of hands, who has Sam now? And all these hands went up. So we're seeing a greater adoption within the construction industry of a robotic bricklayer, essentially. Uh, it's not still widely prevalent. They're not the cheapest things, but when you have a talent shortage in skilled trades, that's only going to get worse. When you have a trade where people retire much earlier than other trades because of the abuse on the body, when you have people coming into the job in the workplace with greater technology skills, I mean, it's sort of becoming a perfect storm that is saying the robotic bricklayer, be it Sam or some other robotic bricklayer, is the future. But the skills you use as a mason are different than the skills you use when you're operating a robotic bricklayer. You still need the knowledge of the mason. You still need to understand how everything goes together. You probably still have to go in and set the joints and the corners and do all that. But now you also have to be a computer programmer to an extent to program the semi-automated mason to lay the bricks. So it's, you could say, well, that's doing your job, it's just upskilling. I think it's reskilling, because you can have a job out there laying bricks where you never get involved with this type of technology, but you reskill, you learn the computer and technology aspects of this, and boy, that's the future. That's where this is going. And you think about, let's go broader. There's now technology out there. It's absolutely terrifying to me, being somebody that grew up on the Terminator. And this is not artificial intelligence, by the way, but think of the Terminator after Arnold Schwarzenegger had no more of Arnie on him. He was that terrifying robot. It sort of looks like that, but it hangs drywall. It comes out of the National Institute of Standards and Technology in Japan, and what they found is it is slower than a human drywaller, but the quality is far superior to a human drywaller. This technology will be entering the marketplace increasingly in coming years. And just think about everything related to construction and everything, when we talked a little bit about generative design and what might be coming out of building information modeling next year compared to 2 years ago, it's technology, technology, technology. So for our firms to keep up, we need to understand it. But for our firms to gain a competitive advantage, we have to go beyond. And so, quick story to share with you, and the timing is perfect. Back in 2012, 2013, I was involved with a big research initiative by the Society for Marketing Professional Services, or FSMPS, and we were looking at changes in business development in the coming decade. And then more recently, I was asked to write an article for the SMPS Marketer, which is the journal, and look back over the decade and what did we get right and what did we get wrong. And so I'm going through all the findings from 2013 when it was actually published, and technology was, it was big, but it was an interesting mindset, because what we did in the research is we interviewed the sellers of design and construction services, so architecture, engineering, environmental, construction firms, and then we interviewed the buyers, which are the owners and the end users that are hiring these types of firms. What the sellers, the design and construction firms, told the researchers was that, oh, we're going to use technology to become more productive, to gain more profit, to get more projects coming in the door. We're going to use it as a sales and marketing tool. What the buyers of the services told the researchers was that we expect design and construction firms to use technology to our benefit, to do our projects more cheaply, to do our projects more quickly, and to improve the quality of our projects. So both sets, the buyers and sellers, were looking at it from their viewpoint. Well, guess what? If you are the seller, the architect, engineer, contractor, environmental firm, you need to focus on the buyer's viewpoint, because that's what's going to get you the job and keep the relationship.
Yeah, I know, working for a large Fortune 500 organization and managing kind of their capital spend and construction, that was huge in the design build teams we partnered with. Was what kind of technology were they leveraging? Did they have full BIM models that would be turned over to us afterwards? How did that integrate to our facility management and operations systems at the organization? So I think as technology continues to grow and is incorporated in these design build programs and teams, clients will really see a benefit from that if companies really sell it that way, because there is a huge opportunity for kind of the end user to integrate smart sensors and whatnot in the operations of their facilities post-construction.
Go back a decade ago, think about building information modeling, or BIM. About a third-ish of the firms were using it. Maybe not on all projects, but it was growing in prevalence. Now it's it's everywhere. At least for the vertical construction. But how much of it is actually being turned over to a sophisticated owner, Jen, like where you were?
Yeah.
It's not a lot.
No.
There's a huge application, and that's the realization of BIM, right? That was called originally BIM 60, where it would become part of the CAFM, the computer aided facilities management, where you could run your facility from that building model. But it's the classic scenario of garbage in, garbage out. So if you're going to use that to manage your facilities, what has to go in it? And what has to go in it might not be a skill set that the architect or engineer has today. So it's incumbent, if the clients are continuing to move that way on the owner side, incumbent upon the architecture engineering community to reskill, to understand the applications as a facilities management tool, how BIM can be used, whether it's Revit or another product out there, because then you can have a competitive advantage in the marketplace, right? Reskilling to me is not just about doing things better, doing things differently. It's about opening the door for new opportunities. Reskilling is keeping up with technology, but it's also where you're going in the future, and we can't lose sight of that.
Right. If you're using automation for, predictive maintenance, and you're using, the best technology, keeping yourself ahead, that is such a huge benefit to clients. And then on top of that, I think one of the things that we've talked about is that consultative aspect as well. So learning those more technical pieces of how to put in the right prompts or manage that, and then take that output that the technology has given you, and then be able to utilize that, be able to run your own QA/QC, correct any mistakes. But then there's the consultative aspect, like you were talking about, of then relaying that information either to project partners or to clients. So what are you seeing as far as um, that aspect of that that more technical component, but then also being able to relay the information and communicate it?
I think we're falling behind. We're falling behind as an industry in the built
Yeah.
environment, but all industries are falling behind. The rate of adoption of artificial intelligence in the chat GPT realm, and there's Bard, there's other tools out there, but that was the sort of the rocket ship. When you look at social media users, steadily inclining over the years, then you look at chat GPT and it's like vertical. Everybody sort of jumped on it. Very few people truly understand how to use it. And as a result of that, people worry about the professions that they're in that might be hugely impacted by that. But before we get to that point of you're going to be unemployed because of artificial intelligence, I think we first need to reskill to understand what's required on the front end and what's required on the back end. And, on the front end, a simple example, say generative design, say you're using that to lay out ductwork in a space. And, you think laying out ductwork, laying out conduit, laying out piping, plumbing piping, for instance, fairly basic work that an engineer does. Far more brain power goes into the calculations. So you use technology as an assist, and you say, okay, well, the ventilation is going to enter over here and it's going to exit there, and let's figure out the path through the space, and going off in the different directions, and where the vents and the diffusers and everything is going. We need to understand what we need to tell generative design that we want. And then on the back end, we might be presented with several options. We need to have the mindset, the expertise to say this one makes the most sense. And then we need to be able to do the quality control to check it, because we can't assume it's right. I mean, you think, different example, ChatGPT, probably heard the story of the college professor that failed all his students because he took their essays, he pasted them into ChatGPT, and he said, did you write this? And ChatGPT said, yes, I did. Well, ChatGPT said that to War and Peace as well. So we can't trust what we're getting right now. We might get to that point, but as far as the skill set, we need to be experts on the front end. We need to be experts on the back end if we're going to utilize this technology. And I don't think we're thinking that way. I was just talking with a colleague of mine this week, in fact, and he's recently moving towards retirement, but he's not out yet. And he's like, these clients that I'm working with, they're just accepting what comes out of AI without question. So the industry is going to go downhill rapidly if that's the mindset. Just, okay, it did it for me, I'm good. You might have garbage. You might have total garbage. It's not true. It won't work. It's trying to have water flow uphill. Gravity's going to fight that, right? We need to have the skill set to understand how to utilize the newer technologies, and it's not there. And one of the reasons it's one of the reasons why it's not there is that we don't have the providers of the education, right? The future providers of the education to help understand this are learning it themselves. But it's like we're walking across the bridge as we're building it.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that are going to train are walking here, but right next to them are the people that are already using it, having not been trained. So
Yeah.
at some point, somebody's going to fall off the bridge, right? And we need to be very aware about this because, yes, technology is great. Yes, we want to try these new things, but we have to understand it first. And then we have to understand the skills that are required to effectively utilize it.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect way to think about when we talk about that consultative mindset, right? We talk about you need the technical skills at the center, then you need to be able to layer on that insight and discernment and strategy. So we may have AI taking over part of that technical skill, but we still need to layer over insight, discernment, right? Is this garbage out? And then that strategy. So I think as engineers leverage this technology, they need to make sure they're still looking at it in that consultative mindset. And I think it is really tough right now because we're all running down the bridge and it's still being built. But I do think there's value sometimes in putting the tech kind of like in the front hands, in the hands of the frontline workers, because sometimes as leadership, we don't even know how they may leverage it or where it can be really a cost saver or an efficiency saver. So sometimes you do have to do some piloting and let them play with it a little bit. But to your point, there's got to be a QA QC check at the end stage of it.
Yeah, I don't know what ingredients are in this meal, but I know I love the meal.
Yeah.
So who's coming up with the ingredients? And I think this is really where our younger staff members in our companies up through the emerging leaders in the companies are bringing this skill set. Who's better prepared to adopt to generative design, to large language models? It is the people that grew up in technology rapidly advancing through every stage of their life, as opposed to, me, I'm a Gen Xer. I often tell the story. I had one class with a computer in college.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
Excuse me, let me rephrase that. In high school, I had one class in high school. By the time I got out of college, I was using the computer every single day. Now, back then, it was MS-DOS. It was a black screen with green text until, my second year in the workforce, we got Windows 3.1. But it was not I wasn't raised on technology. It was something I had to adopt to. So, when we look at millennials and Gen Z, we often talk about them being digital natives, whereas Gen X, baby boomers, were more the digital immigrants. So I like to think I'm on top of technology. I use it all the time. I try to, pay attention to the trends and learn new things. Part of who I am, again, is the learner. That's something I do. I know a lot of people in, similar roles to what I do for a living, similar age, and it's passing them by. And so the disruption is there, but the people who should be really understanding the disruption and leveraging it for a company is the younger professionals, the younger staff members, that it's just another day. Oh, something new. Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we think about all of the, the changing demographics that we're seeing, but then also this reskilling that's necessary for firms right now and for leadership in firms right now, what can they be doing? How do they reskill their employees? How does that happen?
Two words: learning culture. Companies need to create a learning culture. We are good in the built environment at teaching the hard skills that are required.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you design the structure for a warehouse. This is how you design a highway. This is the stormwater management plan. You get these hard skills that you use every day in your job. But when we're talking about technology, and it's not just the skill set of using the technology, it's the critical thinking that goes with it, the analytical thinking. It's the ability to embrace change management. These are soft skills that are required of companies to really push down to their staff. Everybody needs to have really robust soft skills. And the irony is that we are at this place in society and in the business world where change is a daily occurrence. It was a daily occurrence before the global pandemic that kind of accelerated some things. We're still, several years since the onset, we're still a different business world than we were back then. Some has come back to norm, others maybe changed forever. But we're at this place where change is a common thing. It's honestly, it's daily. Something in our industry, something in the business world is changing, and we're all running to keep up with it. Why are we as an industry, why are we as companies not focused on giving our employees the skills that they need to keep up with that change? Part of it is change itself, change management, accept the change, be flexible, adaptable, agile, be anticipatory in your thinking so you understand what's coming, have the critical and analytical skills, have the creative thinking skills. That's part of it. But then there's and a lot of that I believe is upskilling, because it's going to help you do your job better today. Then the reskilling is, all right, how are you going to use generative design? How are you going to use large language models? How are you going to be the prompt artist on the front end and the QA QC control on the back end? This is critical for all these firms. Every single firm should be asking this right now. And if you develop a learning culture where you are creating a safe space where a new hire can come in and say, I learned this new tool in college, and it's going to totally disrupt, architecture, engineering, construction, whatever, and you're not even talking about it right now, that it should be safe for that employee to say, hey, you know what? I can teach you a little bit of what I learned, and then maybe as a group we can go learn more. We need to have that. But this is the way we do it. We're going to continue to do it this way. We've been doing it this way for 40 years. That's bankruptcy. That is no future as a company. So develop a learning culture and embrace all different types of learning from all different topics. That is the only way you can keep up with this rapid rate of change that we're experiencing.
Yeah, that management of curiosity instead of management by fear, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're kind of at our time here. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. As always, you are the trends guy and the trends expert and on the cutting edge, and it's very much appreciated. I think as we move forward, right, we're going to just see, as we know, we're going to see AE as the number 3 most out of all the industries in the workforce as the most highly disrupted by AI and automation. And the reskilling that comes along with that is going to take over. So I appreciate you being on today to discuss that with us and to have a chat. And of course, we will have you on again.
Thank you so much for having me. Anytime.
All right. Thank you.